Assalamu alaikum. This is Ali Khan with the PSL Lounge on GRC TV. We have with us Musad Afzal from Change of Pace. Musad, how are you?
I'm all right. I've had better months.
Yeah, I wanted to, this podcast or this video podcast is about the Quetta Gladiators. The Gladiators were one of the teams early on that were one of the better teams in PSL. Runners really consistent, really at the forefront of finding not only talent locally but also internationally.
Yeah.
Um, they won the title, and then it's been pretty much downhill ever since. So, was that tell me something? Talk to me about why you became a fan of Quetta. What's the link? And then how you feel about what's going on with the franchise this year and over the past couple of years.
It's a loaded question, a two-part question. Look, thanks for having me on, first of all. Um, and Quetta Gladiators, I think they still embody the nostalgia of 2017, mainly because Sarfraz is leading them, and they've still got players like Hafiz and Akmal around. And I think when the PSL started, it was around the time when the PSL was also when we won the Champions Trophy. So it was natural. I really did believe in Sarfraz as a leader. I look back at it and I still do. So I went with him. I'm a big fan of him as a cricketer and a leader. So I just thought, okay, this is my franchise. Personally, I'm from Karachi, but I have Lahori heritage. So I felt like I couldn't pick either one of those two teams because I would just not be, I won't be doing justice to my heritage or where I'm from. So I went with Quetta. It was a safe option, had a good captain. As for the second part of your question, in terms of what's going wrong, it would be a much shorter answer if you asked me what's going right. But because most of everything is going wrong, and I think that's also starting at the top, from the ownership, from team selection, and specifically the captain as well. Like there's just no hiding from Sarfraz's personal form and the decisions that he's making in terms of selecting the right 11. There's no hiding from the people they've picked in the draft. Also, no hiding from the fact that sometimes their middle order looks like it's a team sheet from 2013. So I mean, it's a colossal failure.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, right? Because I think, as I said in the beginning, we always saw Quetta as being kind of at the forefront, kind of this underdog team. Obviously, Sarfraz was their captain, but Sarfraz has certain strengths, but he also has certain limitations.
Yeah.
And early on, we saw those strengths, right, on the back of winning the Champions Trophy. He was the captain of Pakistan, so he had a certain cachet about him. Over the last couple of years, we've seen obviously, Sarfraz has not been in the team. He's made a return this year to Test cricket, but he's not the captain of Pakistan. He's also not the captain of Sindh anymore. Saud Shakil is the captain of Sindh. What do you see from Sarfraz now that on the negative side, that maybe you didn't see earlier, where he was pretty good at leading the team? Because I bring that up because even when Sarfraz was at his peak as a captain for Quetta or for Pakistan, it wasn't that he was like a dominant batsman, right? Which is really his primary responsibility, to be a batsman. If he's not performing as a batsman, then his utility is not that great. So, what were you seeing then when he was having a lot of success versus what you're seeing now?
Look, I think cricket is one of those sports where captaincy is so important. It's not like football and the rest some other mainstream sports. With cricket, you're playing such a pivotal role as captain, as a decision maker, and as a leader on and off the field. That role becomes incredibly difficult to do if you don't actually belong to the starting 11, or your form is just not good enough. You're not doing your, like as you put it, your primary role, which for Sarfraz Ahmed I would say is batting and of course wicket keeping too. I think his wicket keeping hasn't really been too much of an issue. Like of course he had a bad test match this year, but in T20s that's not really been the game changer. It's not really made too much of a difference. You also made a fair point. He's never been like a top level T20 batter ever across his career. But to be fair, he's had a pretty decent record against spin across his career, and that's why when we were playing T20s in the UAE at home, he could squeeze in the middle order and actually get us some important runs at a decent rate around 135, 140, and that continued. And I think he was self aware enough that around 2020 you would see him like really demote himself down to sometimes even 8 or 9, because he knew that anytime that he would come out to bat, the opposition would opt for high pace, and then he wouldn't be able to deal with that. And even his prowess against spin was kind of dying out. So I think the primary issue with Sarfraz isn't really that he's become a bad captain. I think that he's still a very good cricketing mind and he's a good captain, but it's that there's very little self-confidence left because of his own personal form, especially in the T20 format. The last game that Quetta lost was the prime example of that. I mean, with all due respect, even after conceding 140 plus after 50 for 7, that was a very chaseable target.
Right.
He then later attributed the loss to a slow post middle order phase, which is okay. I get it. Like, yeah, there was only 6 or 7 runs scored from the next 2 or 3 overs after the power play. But even then, in 2023, 10 runs and over is really no ask at
Right.
all. So yeah, I think the problem starts with any cricket captain, and just as is the case with Sarfraz. If he can't perform, he can't do his batting duties, then that will in turn affect his captaincy. It's been happening for the past 4 years now.
Yeah, so it's interesting some of the comments that you make about Sarfraz. I think one of the things that I always bothered me about Sarfraz, because I was always a Sarfraz fan as well. I thought
Yeah,
Sarfraz was very much hard done by. I think that Kamran Akmal stuck around too long, and that wasn't Kamran Akmal's fault. That was whoever was making that decision. And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
he was wrong on Sarfraz. And I think to an extent, Sarfraz was around too long. I think when Rizwan
yeah,
was ready, Pakistan needed to go a little bit earlier. At the same time, I was always a proponent of Rizwan and Sarfraz. I think there's so much cricket nowadays that you need that depth and you need to utilize it. This idea of like the 90s or even after that, where if a guy is gone, he's just gone forever. I'm not a big proponent of that, and I think we saw that this year, right, against us in the Test series. Sarfraz came back; he was phenomenal. Where Rizwan was struggling a little bit. But I think one of the things that has always bothered me about Sarfraz is that maybe a level of accountability. When you're the captain of the team, even when he was captain and things were going well, I found sometimes when Pakistan would lose games in the post match, he would be like, "Oh, we didn't bowl well, we didn't bat well." I think he is the captain, and I think I've never heard Sarfraz ever say, "Hey, I was out in the middle and I needed to do more." That part of Sarfraz is something that always has bothered me. Um, and I'm not sure why no one's ever gotten in his ear and said, "Hey, it would be really valuable for your team and your leadership to just say, hey, today, I just couldn't get it. I just couldn't, move things along. I needed to take more responsibility." And I know it's a really unfair comparison with Dhoni, because obviously Dhoni is like another level of a player. But with Dhoni, it was like you always got the sense of, hey, my team is in trouble. I'm going to stand here like a wall and I'm going to figure this thing out. I think Sarfraz is maybe not that level of player, but I would like him to take that level of accountability.
there's certainly a lack of that. You said something about people in his ear. I think for a very long time he's got too many people in his ear that are just the wrong people. That's a big part of his the way his psyche is going. I need to prelude this by saying that I'm still a Sarfraz fan. Like I'm indebted to what he's done for our team, and not just me. You can speak to the guys that he's played with, and I always say that your colleagues are a really good kind of meter for who you are as a person and who you are as a professional. And all the way from Hassan Ali to Shadab Khan, everybody in between, even Babar Azam, will speak very highly of him, even outside of the press. So I still think that he's done great things, but it's been time for a while now to put that up. When it comes to accountability, this is something that we've seen from the start. I always have felt about him, even when he started his career, and I actually think that this is a double-edged sword. I think he was always very defensive about his place in the team. Like it always felt like he was fighting against the grain. Now, the positive side of that is that you're always working hard, you're always pushing, you're always trying to do as best as you can. The negative side of that is exactly what you've brought up. You kind of lose sight, and you never ever want the fingers being pointed at you. And that really, after the 2019 World Cup, you saw that saw that to happen quite often. I still feel like, look, it was the correct decision for him to be replaced by Rizwan in all formats. Frankly, Pakistan doesn't have a very rich history of wicketkeeper batters, men that do both really well. But Rizwan is an exception to a lot of cases. As a Sarfraz fan, I'll say that he could easily, be the best wicketkeeper batter we've had yet. But then at the same time, yeah, leaving the door ajar for him to make a test comeback is completely fine. For a series or two, once Rizwan regains form, I don't even think it should be a question, especially considering in terms of the longer format, the more overs you have to keep, he's the right bet to make for Pakistan cricket. So yeah, I just think it's the defensiveness. It's surrounding yourself with, I wouldn't say wrong people, but certainly not the people that cultivate the right kind of positive mindset. And yeah,
Yeah, no, I wanted to add to that, and sorry to interject, is that I think it's definitely not the wrong people. I think there are people around Sarfraz that very much support him, and I think Quetta's
yeah,
been at the forefront of that. I think that the issue probably is that there's a lot of people saying yes, and you're doing great or you're great, rather than hey, this is what we need to do better.
yeah,
And I think that kind of constructive kind of conversation, I think that's not been happening. And I think a lot of that, and I know a lot of fingers are pointed at Sarfraz because I think in cricket the captain has outsized, if you will, power, which he shouldn't, in my opinion. I think the way that international sport is going, and even the way that cricket is going, for a captain to be making so many decisions when he doesn't have all the information, when he's not doing any of the research, when he's not doing any of the work, I think is ridiculous. I think that eventually what you're going to see in cricket, specifically T20 cricket, you're going to see like an active manager on the sidelines, like we do with like Pep Guardiola or like Jose Mourinho, or I think you're going
yeah,
to see that eventually because captains, when you watch what they're doing, and it's not so for us, it's everybody almost. It's like, wait, why did he just do that, right? And it just like there's too much data now, there's too much information for captains to just be making decisions at the seat of their pants. But the point I wanted to get to with Sarfraz is that I think Sarfraz has not been supported well. I think that knowing anyone who's watched Sarfraz throughout his career, he is the same exact player, right? He's told you what he is. You talked about his prowess against spin or his weakness or kind of average performance against pace. Everybody knows that. That's not a secret. The issue is that has Quetta surrounded him with players that complement that, right? And I think that is where the failure lies. I think it's the way that the management has used him at Queta's level that's
yeah,
actually negatively impacted kind of the conversation around Sarfraz, where he's getting a lot of blame, but
yeah,
no one's talking about, hey, the ideal guy to be batting with Sarfraz in the middle order is someone like Azam Khan,
yeah.
who you do not have anymore.
Yeah, nobody's saying why did you pick Martin Guptill? No indicator, no T20 indicator it makes sense. Like no, there's no justification for bringing him in a modern day T20 side. Look, the thing that you said though about Surfraz not being supported, if you had said this to me 2 years ago, I would have been like, yeah, 100%. I agree on the money completely. I'll tell you what though, that percentage is lowering now, and the only reason I say that is because I think his individual ability as a T20 cricketer, I want to make that really clear. That's a T20 cricketer is weakening, and so Ramiz Raja occasionally says the right thing, and one of the few times he did was he says Pakistani cricketers just don't know when to go. And frankly, I think that's the same case with Sarfraz. I think it's time to go, man. I think it's time to go from the T20 format and the ODI format. If nothing else, it was really time to give over the Quetta Gladiators captaincy to somebody else in 2021 or 2022. Surely shouldn't be captaining 2023. We've gone three seasons now without even a sniff at the playoffs. In a 6-team league, that's frankly ridiculous.
Right, right. It's a real race to the bottom for that number
Yeah,
four spot, right? Those last three
exactly.
teams are pretty bad, right? So
Yeah,
I actually disagree with a little bit of that, in that
sure.
I think that I think that there's a systemic issue, right? So when
There is, yeah.
Ramiz Raja, who held on forever, right? Ramiz Raja was made captain in
That's
1997 when there was like so many but much better players in the Pakistan team. There's no way that Ramiz Raja plays. I'm doing a show with Mohammad Wasim on GRC. There's no
sure.
way that in '97, at the latter stages of his career, Ramiz Raj is getting picked and captained ahead of Mohammad Wasim, Ajaz Ahmed, whoever, right?
That's true.
So it's a little rich coming from Ramiz, who
It
really,
is pot kettle black, but as many things are in Pakistan.
yeah, yeah. But I think I think it's very unfair to expect a player to move on because
Mhm.
of the economic dynamics of operating in the Pakistani system. The players don't get paid a lot, right? They get paid a lot in PSL, but the actual domestic cricketer, the international cricketer, is not getting paid a lot, right?
True.
And so to go from having to then not having, and then not having really a pathway to earning a lot of money
Hmm.
after cricket. I think it forces players obviously to hang on. All of them are hanging on, and I think
Yeah,
it's more about the system, right? And so it's really down to like the selectors, whoever is making the roster construction decisions for your team to say, hey, this
yeah,
guy's no longer good enough. We have to move on from him. And the
yeah,
thing is like we leave it to the player. Obviously, the player's not going to move on, and why should he, right? If he's making one
yeah.
hundred $50,000, would any fan move on from one hundred fifty
Oh,
thousand
fair
dollars?
enough. No, I think that's actually I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think the key point which you've made about it being a much larger issue, the systematic thing, all the way from the draft selection, all the way from the makeup of the 11, it's actually above the pay grade of even the captain. It's not the case in the PSL where the captain is picking the squad, picking the draft picks, and then also deciding the starting 11. Certainly not happening. The money thing is a good point. It's something that I'll be frank, I didn't factor in because if you gave me that much money for a month, and even if I was mediocre I'd probably stay. So I mean, like I mean that's straight up, like you said, any fan they probably wouldn't quit either.
Any human, right? You're just gonna hang on. It's like, dude, I need that money.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to get that bag, as they say. But the point also being, one of the reasons why I think nobody's able to go up to him and say, "Look, man, it's not working out," is because of that. The greater governance around Quetta Gladiators is too much like a family. Now, you and I know when you start a job in the corporate world and they tell you we're a family, that's the biggest red flag.
Yeah.
And the problem with the Quetta Gladiators is that they actually are a family,
Right.
because it's basically the evolution of Omar Associates. And the early years of QG, that was great because you had players coming through the ranks. You had Nawaz sticking around, who's still around. You had some of the younger guys coming through that were playing for QG. It was really well complemented by overseas cricketers like Riley Russo, who's now winning games for Multan, or Kevin Peterson, who had that awesome season. But now that's not happening as much. And now when things are not going as well, who's going to be that child in the family that puts his hand up and says, "We need something to change"?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a great point. And I always say like, it's so easy to blame the players. Those are the guys that we see at the forefront, and even the captain. But at the end of the day, like there's somebody bigger making a decision. There's a lot of conversation right now around the Karachi Kings, and everybody wants to talk about,
Yeah,
Amir and Nimad and whatever. It's like, wait, Salman Iqbal is the owner, right? He's the owner. He's the guy who's paying the bills.
yeah,
He's the one who's appointing the president, the coach, whatever. Is he at
mhm,
some point going to come out in the media and kind of like take questions?
yeah,
Is the president going to take questions? And that's not to say that's not a criticism. That's just how you run an organization. Like the guy who's making the decisions need to come out in the forefront and answer the
yeah.
questions. And I think that well, in cricket, because of like the outsized importance of the captain, we think the captain's making all the decisions. No, he's not. Right?
He's not, no.
He's not. Right?
Although I will say this, Ali, that the dynamic between franchises is a little bit different. Like, for example, for QG, I know that Omar Bhai is very much involved in the cricket side of things. He always has been. But let's take a look at Islamabad United, for example, right? I know for a fact that Ali Naqvi is not super involved in the cricket side. There's people like Rehan who are heavily, like, they're kind of empowered to make cricketing decisions. And I can kind of see when you put specialist people in specialist jobs, the results are there to see.
Right. Right. No. No. I think that's it. Well, I think people thought that Quetta had that as well, right? Obviously, they have Moin
Yeah,
Khan, they have Azam Khan. I think they have Nabil Hashmi as well,
yeah.
who are obviously been a part of theirs. They've had success in other leagues as well in Sri Lanka, although I don't think anyone cares about that.
But yeah, it's a win is a win.
Yeah, it's a win, right? It's a win is a
Yeah.
win, definitely. And I think that they've done a lot of good things. But I wanted to kind of go through like the Quetta rosters. I don't know if you can see. Can
Mhm.
you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
This was a title-winning roster, right? This is the team that won. Shane Watson. I don't remember how much Sunil Narayan actually played, but obviously Shane Watson played a lot. Riley
Yeah.
Russo, Swil Tanviro obviously was a different point in his
Yeah.
career. This is a really good team. Like this is a really good team.
It
You
is
have
for 2019. Yeah.
a young Naseem Shah, Muhammad Asnan. But I think the big thing is that you have guys around Sarfraz who actually overcome some of his weaknesses. Guys like Shane Watson, Riley
Yeah.
Russo.
Yeah.
They've never been able to replace those guys, in my opinion. Um, and I
You know
think
what
that
the crazy thing about this roster is, that Riley Rousseau is the MVP on this roster, and he's in gold,
right.
and now he's playing for platinum, and Quetta let him go. That just, yeah, it's ridiculous.
And he's and I was teaching this class recently, and we did this like draft of Pakistan's. You could pick any player from Pakistan history, right? You can pick like Hafiz Kardar as your captain of your T20 team, right? Because,
Nice.
for example, Imran Khan, right? Imran Khan would be like one of the first picks in any kind of PSL draft in this, even in this.
Yeah, him and like Wasim too with his batting ability. Yeah, why not?
Even though we never saw them play T20, they would definitely be
Yeah,
number one picks.
yeah,
Um, and if you look at this Quetta team, Omar Akmal 3, 4, 5 years ago was a really good
yeah.
player.
He had a
Um,
good season in 2019, actually.
yeah, he was a really good season, right? And,
Yeah,
and I think they've never been able to kind of replace these guys. Like the way that they transitioned from these guys was really faulty, and I think that's kind of like the crux of their issues.
yeah. But the problem is not just replacements. To be fair, Ali, like the problem is also the wrong retentions. You
Mm,
look around you right now. We put out a graphic. We're calling it the run rate renaissance
mm,
over on Change of Pace about all these young batters that are coming through and really changing the way T20 is played in Pakistan cricket. And two of the guys, Azam Khan and Saima Ayub, who we put on that list, are Quetta Gladiators alumni. We
right.
both, and I understand in the draft system, you're not going to be able to hold on to every single piece of talent you get, but surely we should have been able to keep one of them.
No, and I think that's a huge point, right? Because Azam, I think Azam's an interesting story. Number one, I
Yeah.
think when people first saw Azam, never really played domestic cricket. I know he played some Asian cricket for Karachi. There
Mhm.
was this really real concept around, hey, Azam is just there because his dad's the coach, right? And Quetta continued to back him, and I think a lot of us didn't see it, and obviously now everybody sees it. Like, it's clear as day. This guy is awesome. And Quetta is the one that really developed him, and they weren't able to keep him. They traded him. They actually actively traded him for Iftikhar Ahmed. No
Yeah.
disrespect to Iftikhar, because Iftikhar is very good, but you're
Right.
trading a young wicket-keeping batsman who does something that no one else in Pakistan cricket does for Iftikhar Ahmed.
Yeah.
And then Saim Ayub, who they picked a little early, which says that they knew all about him. Then when he didn't perform well because he was playing a little bit early, they didn't
Yeah.
retain him, and now he's on Peshawar. So I think that's not really draft dynamics. That's just bad management. Because
It is.
if you look at Islamabad, all of their core players they've been able to retain. Shadab's been there forever. Fahim, Asif. They have Azam there now. They have Mohammad Wasim, Hassan Ali. So they've obviously figured that part out. Why hasn't Quetta?
First thing, I think you're right. We need to applaud their eye for talent. I think Nabil Hashmi is doing a terrific job there. He's on the ground with Karachi cricket very often, so that's why I think it gave him the ability to pick up people like Azam Khan and even to a certain extent Saima Ayub. But when it comes down to retentions, Lahore Qalandars had this problem in the early years of the Pakistan Super League. It always felt like they were chasing names rather than performances, which I think in a lot of sports you make these mistakes. Like you'll see it all across. You'll see it in basketball. You see it in football. Cricket is not exempt to those
Chelsea.
mistakes. Yeah, yes, exactly. That's a good one as well. I'm living through that this year too. It's not been a good one. But as for Quetta, it just felt like how in what world would you pick a Martin Guptill over Simon Ayub? Simon
Mm,
Ayub is your boy. You
right,
invested in him. You put time into him. You also paid his salary for those years.
right.
And clearly, Nabil saw something in him. The think tank saw something in him. Azam is a different story because we always get mixed messages about him wanting to wicket keep, and of course, Sarfraz was not going to give up that position, and so then it made sense for him to go and wicket keep for another franchise. It's another dynamic. Although I believe that at that point Sarfraz could have given up his position as wicket keeper, but then again, that's another can of worms I don't want to get into. But generally, Quetta have been impatient with their young talent, and I think the problem is because the leadership and the ownership feels that their solution is in international superstars. You mentioned Islamabad United. Islamabad United are still the most successful franchise at the PSL. And I think it's very likely that that will change this season. But that being said, you have to pay respect to their success. And I think people, when they think of Islamabad, think of the likes of Colin Monroe and Shane Watson, and maybe this season a bit of a Tom Curran. But the truth is, they're winning because of their Pakistani core. They and that's why Lahore are defending champions. The only exception to that rule would maybe be Multan Sultans because Riley Rousseau had an insane season. But even in that team, Sean Masood had an insane season as well. Rizwan was amazing. Shanawaz Dahani was the highest wicket taker of that year. So you're gonna win PSL titles because you have a strong Pakistani core. That's as simple as that. And I think Quetta have forgotten that a little bit.
Every league, right? If you're an
Yeah,
IPL
yeah, yeah,
manager, you need an Indian core, right? That's your most valuable because the foreign players are going to come and go, right? Jason Roy is an important player for you. He's in Bangladesh right now. When I was with,
Hasaranga didn't show up. That's a huge blow.
it's a huge blow, right? That was a great pick, but again, he's not available.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when I was with Jamaica, when I arrived, we had Chris Lynn, we had Daniel
Mhm.
Vittori, this was a while ago, right? These guys are all
Yeah,
retired now. So
yeah,
we had all these guys, but it was like, wait, who do we have that's Jamaican, that's here locally, that is going to
yeah,
be a guarantee for us, that's going to be really committed to the cause? Let's
yeah,
build a core of Jamaican and West Indian players
yeah,
as kind of like the guys that we're going to build the foundation around. And that was one of Queta's greatest strengths, right? They had Sarfraz in the early years, Nawaz.
yeah,
Later on, Naseem Shah came along. They've been able to, they've had that, and then they've gotten away from it, right? And I think if you look at the teams that don't have a strong Pakistani core, it's Karachi, it's Quetta, right? Or if they have it, they don't know it, and they're not playing the right guys.
yeah. That's more Karachi.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. So I think, and let's dive in a little bit. You can speak as much as you want into that trade between
Yeah.
Azam and Iftikhar, because I think when I can speak to it. When I initially saw that trade, I thought it was a huge mistake, because I think you're giving away a young, aggressive, unique player like Azam for Iftikhar, who's a really good player, but he has his limitations. He's much older than whatever it even says probably on Quick Info. Um, and as good as Iftikhar is, he's not Azam, right? You could see Azam growing, and I think the whole narrative around Azam wanted to go. Well, you know, just because a player wants to go doesn't mean he can just go, right? And I think
Yeah, make him an offer he can't refuse.
exactly. And Quetta has his dad his father is the coach of Quetta, so they have even a different dynamic. There has to be a level of loyalty to Quetta, because they're the ones, when people were criticizing Azam in the early years about his weight, about that he's not really performing, because he did play in the early years a couple of times but didn't really do anything. But you saw like little glimmers of it. And while people were criticizing Quetta stuck to their guns. I remember Sarfraz coming in the media and saying, no, he's really good, and they were right. To lose that guy, it's like every time Azam plays really well, or Sign plays really well, you're like, those guys were on Quetta.
Look, I said this yesterday on Twitter, and I'll say it again, and maybe it's the Quetta fan in me speaking. You don't see Azam Khan 2023 if Quetta don't back him in 2019 and 2020.
It's
You
true.
just don't. He was not as confident with his hitting. He was not getting the same results at this level. We also have to like understand that the PSL is obviously not an international level, but it's just a step below. So it's not easy to do well in this league, especially with the kind of fast bowling that we have. All teams have a pretty decent fast bowling. The only exception to that rule will probably be Islamabad.
Right.
Every other franchise has pretty decent fast bowlers, and even they have like Hassan Ali on the day is still as good as anybody else. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we backed Azam Khan. We
Right.
invested in him. Like you said, our captain went out in the media and said, look, there's all this crap about him being a Nepo child. And there's all
Yeah.
this stuff being said about his fitness, which might visibly be not good enough. But we believe that when it comes to the application of cricket, he's good enough. He'll be more than fine. And that's exactly what's happening. I feel like it's like, it's like that ex that has a glow up after you leave them. It's a bit like that with Azam Khan. And it doesn't make sense why you would break up right before you know that the glow up's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then Quetta should have made an offer to Azam that he couldn't refuse. Surely there was tactics to negotiate that, as there are in all sports. How many sports have we seen where top players want to leave, but then they change their mind? I mean, Manchester United had a broken fax machine so they could keep a goalkeeper. I don't even buy the fact that it was actually broken. So
Yeah.
like jokes aside, there's viable ways of keeping people like Azam at the franchise. Now, to speak to the trade specifically between Iftikhar and Azam, I'm going to put my hand up and say that I was not alarmed by it. I wasn't saying that okay, because to be fair, the season that he was traded, Azam had like one good innings or one or two good innings for Quetta. So it certainly wasn't what he's doing now. Far from it. So I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm not sure where this guy's career is going to go. We spoke to him on change of pace. It was very obvious that he was dedicated in his craft, but we said, okay, there's a long list of other people that are as dedicated in Pakistan cricket. Fine, we'll take Iftikhar Ahmed. And Iftikhar's star was rising,
Mm.
and he can, on his day, offer you 4 overs, win you the game with the bat as well. So I was like, all right, fine, decent trade, we'll take it. I don't think that Quetta are playing Iftikhar in the wrong position. I'm a big fan of matchups, but frankly, if you're an international cricketer and you can't play 2 deliveries to an unfavorable matchup, then you just don't belong there.
Right.
Which, because people were blaming that, why was Iftikhar sent? Rashid had, like the other night, Rashid had pulled 3.4 overs, which means that all Iftikhar had to do was negotiate 2 deliveries against an unfavorable matchup. If he had to play 2 overs of it, I understand it's a problem. 2 deliveries, not so much. His performance is a completely different issue at all. But I didn't think it was going to be this binary of a trade where it was so clear who got the long end of the stick.
It's like you make that Azam Khan trade, and then all your friends are like, "Wait, why did you break up with her again?"
That's exactly it. And then you're like, you're that guy that's just like, oh, okay, well, I should have stuck around for a little bit longer. I did the hard yards.
It's like those like yearbook pictures that you see in high school. Like you see all these like
Yeah.
supermodels and like these actors, and like you see their high school yearbook pictures, and you're like, oh, they weren't that great looking. And then later on, they're like Hollywood superstars and like supermodels and things like that. And I think that's kind of what the Azam Khan situation is.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I still don't understand why people say that he can't play for Pakistan. Like, um,
So yeah, Wasim was on with me, and we after the first innings where Azam was awesome, and Wasim he talked about it. People can go back and watch about the reasons why Azam wasn't selected or was selected and then later dropped. So I don't buy that anymore. I think we have to change now because I think the way that the privatization of cricket has gone, fitness doesn't really matter anymore. There's really no incentive for Azam to actually get like have a six pack. There's no incentive for him, right? And I don't even think that's like that important. We saw in Zaman when he got a six pack or kind of was moving in that direction. What happened to his batting? I think you got to embrace it. You do want him to move in the right direction, but you have to have kind of understand that this guy's a unique player, and he has to be playing for Pakistan. Like there's no ifs ands or buts. He has to be.
yeah, look, that's an interesting discussion. I'm not an athlete. I'm not a coach either. So it's very. I agree with what you're saying. Recently, I think it was just a month ago, right before the T20 World Cup, the Women's T20 World Cup was announced, and Hilton Moring, the South Africa coach, was so adamant on the fitness requirements. He said it's non-negotiable, and I think Dane Van Niekerk was her name, was not allowed to be in the South Africa squad. And I use the words "not allowed" because she would have made it. She's a great player, but just simply not meeting the fitness requirements of South Africa cricket. So I agree with you on saying that we need to revisit the fitness requirements that we've arbitrarily constructed to be a professional cricketer. At the same time, I think that we should definitely keep encouraging whether it's Azam Khan or anybody else to be in peak physical condition. I was listening to I think Saklan and Ramiz Raja on a TV show, and Azam Khan obviously has been the topic of discussion everywhere, and he was brought up, and Saklan has been in the dressing room with him, and Saklan said we spoke to our fitness staff, which were like foreign picks at that time, about Azam and said like why what do you guys think? And they said, look, you can bring him in. He's a very talented player, but in his current fitness condition, if he gets injured, it is incredibly more difficult for him to recover from that injury than it would be for somebody that is more, he moves quicker or has less body mass or whatever it may be. So I think the Inzi way is definitely not it. I think when I read about that, he just stopped eating. His
Yeah.
nutrition was terrible. He lost a lot of weight, and then of course your muscle mass is going to go with that. You've been around the sport, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if there's a way, and I'm not an expert on conditioning, but if an expert can tell us a way where Azam can uh, keep improving his fitness, that doesn't, by the way, that doesn't mean that he doesn't get selected. I'm just saying, on that route, on that journey, he keeps getting fitter while maintaining his strength and muscle mass. I just think that the biggest winner from that transition would be Azam himself.
Yeah, definitely. But like the way that the cricketers are incentivized today,
The six
Azam's
pack thing, I agree with. That's just ridiculous.
he's a hot property, right? Like he's gonna be any league draft that he's in, he's gonna be paid. He's gonna make a ton of money, right? So the incentive to actually get fit is only for Pakistan cricket, and
Yeah,
so I think because we're Pakistani and we want Pakistan to win World Cups and all that, that's really valuable to us. I think
yeah,
it's gonna be less, more and more. It's gonna be less and less valuable to the player, and I experienced this with, both Jamaica and St. Lucia, where we had, top
yeah,
West Indies players who kind of like they needed surgeries and they needed like to really like have rehab done, but they didn't want to because that means 6 months out. That means missing multiple contracts, right? And
yeah.
as owners are rewarding just the presence of these guys, right? Irrespective of whether they're fit or not, because they're only going to be with them for like a month.
A Darren Sammy effect.
Yeah, the Darren Sammy effect, right? Chris Gale had a knee injury or something. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but he kind of didn't never really got it like fixed, because
Yeah,
again, you're missing out on $1 million, And I think
yeah,
it's human, right? It's not even like I don't even blame the player. It's just the way cricket is now. So I think that Azam, for me, fitness matters. So like let's say if I was running a team like an NBA team or a cricket team, for me fitness is super important, right? Because you see the value add, right? I don't know how much basketball you watch, but like the Miami Heat are known for really like pushing, their players to peak fitness, right? And that's one of the difference makers, in terms of their edge, versus other teams. So I think it's a really valuable thing, where
of course.
weaker players become better, when they're in peak physical condition. But to apply that to Pakistan cricket is wholly unfair because our environment is completely different. Now, I think we have moved in that direction. You see guys like Shadab, Rizwan, Babar, guys super fit. Shoaib Malik, I know he's not on the team, but like, for all the
Yeah.
criticism to Shoaib, like the guy's discipline in terms of his health is like, needs to be commended. But I
Yeah,
think that we have to have a little bit more flexibility around it because our environment in Pakistan is completely
we
different.
do. We do, and also because I feel like when do you bend the rules? You bend the rules when you're desperate. And let's be honest here, Ali, we're desperate for the kind of batter that Azam is. We don't have an abundance. Like, for example, if you had an Azam Khan and you had four other Azam Khans, and out of four of them, two were extremely fit and athletic and were passing and crushing all these beep tests, then fine, you would pick the other two. But I'll tell you what, you don't have them. They don't exist. Azam
Yeah.
is the best you have, and frankly, the other Muhammad Haris is around the corner, but he's batting at a much higher position than him. So in that slot, Azam is the answer. So I don't mind bending the rules for him because it makes sense. And the outcome is for Pakistan to win international trophies. And Azam can help in doing that. It's as
And
simple
bending
as that.
and,
That's the
and I think
outcome.
exactly, and the idea of bending the rules. The thing with Pakistan cricket is that Pakistan cricket has never been consistent with anything. So while some players, we've seen fitness, right? It's applied to some players, it's not applied to other players, right? That's less now than before. Match
Yeah.
fixing, right? I don't want to have this whole conversation necessarily about match fixing, but Pakistan's cricket has been extremely inconsistent about match fixing, where
Yeah.
for certain players, if you're super talented, there's a pathway back for you. But if you're not talented, if you're like Khalid Latif, that nobody
Or
really
even if you're older, man, like
right? There's no pathway
even
back.
if you're older. Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
pathway
Just
back for you. Nobody cares about
no.
you. But if you're Amir, if you're, some of the historically great players for Pakistan, come on down. You're
Proper
forgiven.
red carpet back, in fact.
Yeah,
Forget a pathway.
yeah, you're forgiven, right? So as much as, for example, like if I'm in an administrative position, I would say, hey, match fixing is a red line. It's moral corruption. It's legal corruption. You betrayed your team. There should be nothing. We should have zero tolerance on it. The reality is the jurisprudence around match fixing in Pakistan cricket is so effed up that like those rules, that zero tolerance policy cannot apply.
The other issue is, like you're right. We haven't been consistent with anything. The other issue is, what exactly is the problem you're identifying? You and I spend the past 15 minutes talking about fitness. I'll tell you what, the way somebody looks is not equivalent to fitness. Now, don't get me wrong. There's factors. Of course, if you obviously don't look fit, then you're not as fit as somebody who does. I get that. But match fitness and athleticism is not a one-to-one relationship with the way your body looks like. And with Azam, of course, he's a big guy. And everybody just looks at that figure on screen and says, no, he's not good enough for cricket. But I've been watching this season, and I watched him when he started at Quetta. Now, his first season at Quetta Gladiators, it was clear that his level of fitness and even the way he looked was going to be a hindrance in his performance. 2023, that's not the case. He's not fumbled anything behind behind the stumps. He's taken all of his chances, barring a few that he's dropped that any wicket keeper does. Even Rizwan does that.
Right.
Even Dhoni used to do that.
Mm.
And now, last night he played long innings. He wasn't breaking a sweat. He didn't take unnecessary water breaks. He
Mm.
wasn't a liability to the length of the innings. He was taking the quick singles with Fahim Ashraf. Fahim is a very fit guy,
Right.
and never in the course of that chase did it feel like, oh no, Azam's size is keeping him back from being a good partner to Fahim in between the wickets. No. So if none of that is happening, what exactly is the problem? It's because you don't want a guy that looks like that. You don't want a guy that's that size. That's not good enough. That's
Yeah.
not a good enough
You
reason
make
to exclude 178 strike rate at an average of 45.
you make a great point, right? So there's this player, you probably remember him, Jesse Ryder from New Zealand, right? Big
Of
guy,
course, yeah.
super unfit guy, by the eye, but he used to play at point. He used to field at point. He was super athletic, right? And even Inzamam was he was not like Azam, but he was a really athletic guy, Inzamam. And so I think our concept around fitness, or what is fitness in Pakistan cricket, is just leanness, or what we see that meets the eye. Like Abdul Razak was a super fit guy, but he was not super athletic. Like you can put him in like an
He was a
important
pretty ordinary fielder at times, man,
you can
Razak.
put him in an important fielding position.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing about Azam, you made a great point that Azam, you never feel that, oh, Azam can't take the quick single. When I watch Karachi, I'm like, if you're an opening batsman, singles are not an option if you're batting with Sharjeel. Even the
No,
Sharjeel,
yeah, exactly. So, and I feel like, if you were looking at the look of a guy, then maybe Sharjeel even probably wears a shirt that's a couple sizes smaller than Azam. Does that mean that Sharjeel is more match fit than Azam? Absolutely not.
yeah,
And
exactly.
again, at some point, even the conversation on Sharjeel has played for Pakistan, by the way. Even in, I think, Test cricket, he has one Test match to his name. So we were ready to make an exception for him because we needed to. So again, you have to focus on the outcomes. The outcome is for Pakistan to win Test matches, win international trophies. I think that for T20 cricket, Azam will be able to get us to that outcome quicker. And it's a simple yes for me in that side. And look, there's that story about Zafar Gohar, right? Like Zafar Gohar has a county contract. I can tell you on good account that Zafar he even has a pathway to go get a UK citizenship and possibly play for England.
Mm.
Zafar, and like many other young men in Pakistan, is obsessed with the idea of playing for Pakistan because that's what these young cricketers dream of when they're growing up. The PSL is only 8 years old, and nobody dreams of playing for HBL or Sui Gas Limited, right?
Right.
Everybody's thinking of like, okay, when am I going to put that star on my chest? Maybe the generation now will think of, okay, I want to play for Lahore, Karachi, blah blah. But way back, the Zafar Gohars of the world always wanted to play for Pakistan.
Mm.
I don't think that Azam Khan, who's I think he's a little bit younger than Zafar, will mind that if he doesn't play for Pakistan. His dream will be still to play for Pakistan, but he can easily net $800,000 to $900,000 a year
Right.
through leagues. You
Exactly.
know that. You know what I'm talking about.
It's a financial thing, right? So like when you're on Twitter, and I think no one's going to be saying this now, but when you're on Twitter and Pakistan's bowling is struggling, the first thing you'll hear people say is like, oh, Wasim Akram should be the bowling coach. It's like, wait, that's a really hardworking job. He's making a ton of money, like making ads and doing commentary, and probably has businesses and things like that. Why would he
Yeah.
like go in like the heat of Karachi and Lahore every day and work with bowlers? Like, why would he do that?
Not just that, it's like the most thankless job. I mean, if
Exactly.
your bowlers do well, they're naturally gifted. If they do bad, it's the coach's fault.
Exactly. Exactly. So
It's
it's like the economics of cricket are changing. We need to
yeah,
understand that, and we need
yeah.
to develop policies and ideas around that change, rather
That's why
than
Pakistan don't have a proper head coach because we can't afford it. Why would you go and work for Pakistan across a year and have to deal with journalists that are keep questioning how much you're paying for your rent, rather than just go work for RCB and make the same money in a month
and more, more, and
and
more.
more probably?
I've been in a couple of data rooms. Those guys are making a ton.
There
Those
you
guys
go.
are making a ton of money, right? So,
There you go.
yeah, let's actually get back to Quetta. I know we've been
Sure.
sidetracked. I think the Azam thing is such a polarizing thing right now, and people are like, wait, why can't this guy play for Pakistan?
Yeah.
What is the path forward for Quetta now? I think from a management perspective, let's talk about ownership, head coach, some of the other people in the management team. Are you comfortable going forward with them, or do you think that Quetta needs to make a change?
Look, there's always these fanatics on Twitter that are saying, "Rip open the franchise, change the ownership." That's not going to happen. They have a 10-year lease on it. They've paid a premium price for it. Now's the time for the franchise owners to make money. So Umar Associates and Nadeem Umar is sticking around.
Mm. And
Nabil
he's
Hashmi is picking the right.
he's invested a lot of money in Pakistan cricket.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that entitles him to anything. It just means that he's paid for this 10-year thing. He's BCB can't force him out of it. And I don't think that the people that he's employed in terms of the cricket management are that bad, because first 4 to 5 years of the league, we were actually pretty decent. We are pretty competitive. I think Nabil has a great eye for talent. I said this earlier in the episode. He needs to stick around. I think the problem is really coming out in terms of putting together the right 11. If you open the 2023 squad, it's besides the middle order batting, it's still not that bad. You have a pretty decent fast bowling core with the likes of Naseem and Hasnan. I have my questions about Naveen Ul Haq, but okay, fair enough. If you had Hasaranga come through, that would have been a world class leg spinner, which I think every T20 team needs, whether it's national or franchise. But you waited till 6 games in to play Will Smeed as opener.
Right.
Will Smeed was your best batsman last year. If he was Lahore's best batter, or Islamabad's best batter, you would say, okay, let's see, let's try him out. We don't know if he'll fit our team dynamics or the makeup of our 11. But he was playing for you. He was playing for Quetta last year, and he was by far the best batter. But he was benched for more than half the
Yeah.
season so far. That's just a ridiculous decision. Now, if you look at the kind of reinforcements Peshawar Zalmi are getting in the middle of the season, I think Quetta jumped the gun too early on the draft, and they picked up Hafiz and Omar Akmal as replacements. I don't think those mistakes are, I think, are well, fatal at this point. The likes of Jason Roy not sticking around for long is also an issue, but at the same time, Jason Roy is one of those international players that just hasn't registered that well in the PSL.
Right.
And finally, I think as much as I love the guy, we need a leadership change as well. I thought that Sarfraz would be aware enough to stay at Quetta Gladiators, but hand over the captaincy to the likes of Mohammad Nawaz, because he trusts Nawaz, by the way. And Nawaz has been with Sarfraz for a very long time. People forget that even before the PSL existed, these two knew each other, and they played Pakistan together. And now it's been, well, year 8 of them sticking it out. So I just Nawaz was the natural next captain, as Misbah was after Shadab and many other franchises. Like, I think it would be a refreshing change. You have the fast bowling core, keep the ownership, keep the management, change your captaincy, and wait a bit and get that 11 right. Don't don't cater to the celebs that you're picking. With all due respect to the likes of Martin Guptill and Jason Roy.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned, an eye for talent. I think Quetta has shown in the past that they have an eye for talent. But I think the one thing that's abundantly clear now is that they're not very good at constructing a roster. Because I
Yeah,
think having an eye for talent. So, for example, let's use the Chelsea example. I suspect a lot of people that are watching either watch football. A lot of people
yeah,
probably don't, but I think it's a great example.
yeah,
So, when Todd Bowley comes in, there's this assumption that Chelsea is not a good team. They
yeah,
had a ton of really good players that they inherited.
yeah.
Just because the ownership changed, he wanted to bring in his own guys. And now they have all these redundancies everywhere. There's an article in the Daily Mail today that, oh, Chelsea don't have a striker. It's like, well, Aubameyang is pretty good. Like theoretically, he's pretty good. Like, he's a striker.
Yeah.
So having talent and constructing a roster correctly are two different things, right? You can have
Especially a starting 11, man. Like, even if you have the right squad, like I could, like, for example, this squad that you have up on your screen, we could construct an 11 that's way better than what Quetta continue to field
right.
at the PSL. It's just doesn't make sense. That
I think
ability to put together an 11 is missing.
So I think one of the things that they did in the squad, I actually think they made a lot of mistakes in the squad.
Hmm.
I'll just go through it briefly. Um,
Hmm.
these players are good. Like Dwayne Pretorius, I love Dwayne Pretorius. I scouted him. I tried to recruit him for one of my teams, but back when nobody really knew who he was. He was striking
Hmm.
it at 140, and I was like, wait, why isn't this guy playing T20 cricket around the world?
Yeah.
So I think in theory, a lot of these guys are good players, but if you look at it, they invested a lot of picks on top order foreign batsmen, right? Roy, Guptill, Smeed. That's a lot of picks and investment on top order foreign bats,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Mistake. Bungalzai, I like Bungalzai a lot. He is not the best emerging player from Balochistan. That's Hasibullah. Huge mistake.
That's what a natural pick he would have been for Quetta. I mean, it would just tick so many boxes. It
Felt
would
the
tick
top
the
order
PR
player.
box, the marketing box, the branding box, the cricketing box, the batting box, and there's so many mistakes like that. Yeah.
So yeah, Hasibullah as an opener. You can then complement him with someone like a Jason Roy, a Guptill, or Smeed. Smeed is definitely a core player. So when I'm thinking about core players for PSL teams, I rarely include foreign players because you don't know what
Yeah.
their availability is going to be. Smeed's going to be available, right? He rejected his county contract. He's going to be around for the most part. England is loaded in the top order. Very rarely is there going to be a point where Smeed leaves PSL to play for England. So, you could have built a team around Smeed and Hasibullah, and then had, the core of Sarfraz. What they really needed to invest some of those foreign picks were on that Riley Rousseau type, right? Like Muldan was able to get David Miller, like that type of player. They needed in the
Yeah.
middle order. And then they could kind of pick and choose, right? They can kind of swap between Sarfraz and Iftikhar based on matchups, right? So the other day when they have Rashid Khan, Sarfraz, that was a good opportunity for Sarfraz to come in, but they sent the wrong guy. They sent Iftikhar instead. So that I think that the way that they have Omer Yusuf and Saud Shakil on their team, all guys that have kind of been around for a while. Saud
Yeah.
Shakil should probably be playing in this team right now, right? I would
Which
like to
is
see.
also, by the way, if the fact that right now you have to resort to Saud Shakil is also a problem. Like, I mean, your middle order runs in a T20 game, and Riley Russo, like Omar or Muhammad Hafiz. I mean, the squad, like the options are just not there. It's a proper struggle. I know that Saud has improved tremendously because of that the local T20 improvements that he had in the past couple of years. But I still think that there's better picks out there, even for Quetta.
Right. But I'm talking about this existing squad. Like this is a time that let's
Yeah.
see Omer Yusuf, Saud Shakil.
Yeah.
But I think like the squad is constructed in a way where it's actually challenging to actually build the playing 11, right? The way that if you look at Queta's emerging players are the weakest of all the teams. Even Karachi, if you say there's a lot of criticism around Karachi, but Irfan Niazi was a great pick.
Qasim
Qasim's
Akram, I mean, he's not emerging anymore, but still, like, what a great
yeah,
pick.
pick, right? So you have options. Quetta doesn't really have that many options. And I think it's illustrated by the fact that when Bangalzai left, Yasser Khan comes into the team, who's not even playing in PSL. Not that Yasser Khan's not good. I think he's a very interesting, talented player.
Mhm.
It just goes to show that the planning, the strategy, something was missing, and it's been missing now for 3-4 years.
It's so obvious. And like even with the resources they have, look, Hasnan and Naseem are international level bowlers. They've proven it. Hasnan more so in the ODI format. Naseem is an all format player at this point. But if I was to pick a Pakistani domestic pacer to complement them, to kind of put an arm around them, to guide them because he's done the hard yards, I would pick Umaid Asif. And guess what? Quetta had Umaid Asif in their squad, but they didn't play him. I
Mm.
mean, for the life of me, I don't understand. The last game he played, he had an immediate impact. He had an impact in his fielding. He had an impact with his bowling. He's the right guy for the job. You do need somebody who has experience in the bowling department as well. So again, the squad can be improved tremendously. But even with your limited resources, you're not picking the right 11. It's just like
Right.
it's just a
You're not
circle of
optimized.
incompetence. Like you're not picking the right guys. Now, obviously, Tashara not showing up, Hasaranga not showing up. I don't know how much impact Roy would have had, but Roy leaving is not the best thing for the Gladiators. But I just feel like it's like Pakistan in 2019. Like we realized our best 11 after we lost our first two games, and by then we had one foot out of the tournament.
Yeah, I think that's historically a problem for Pakistan. I always use the example of Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
Atletico Madrid does not have the resources of Real or Barca, but when they won, the La Liga title, they've almost never made any changes because they know exactly the formation they're going to play, the style that they're going to play, who their best 11 guys are. It shouldn't take you long, right? So like this is one of my, when I was interviewing coaches, I would ask them. I would always interview the coaches after the draft, not before the draft, to kind of retain that power. But so,
Yeah.
so 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 after the draft, I would always ask them, it's like, oh, how would you construct the 11? And that would tell me exactly if they knew like the players, if what their philosophy was, things like that. And so like it shouldn't take you like 6 games. I remember Ahmad early in the tournament when Karachi was losing, he said, "Oh, it's gonna take us 4 or 5 games to figure it out." And I was like, "Oh, that's
No,
it's gonna be too long, too late."
no, yeah, you're. It's a small tournament, man. There's six teams. Starting. I know that historically, I know Islamabad PSL 6 and Multan in the season that there was the pandemic. They both started well and they lost, but getting your foot into the playoffs early or looking like you're going to make the playoffs early is really really important. This digging yourself a hole early in the tournament, it hardly ever works. And Karachi and Quetta have both done that. And frankly, for some of these guys, Imad Wasim, who's not part of the national setup anymore, the biggest assignment of the year is the PSL.
Right.
So you're showing up to the biggest assignment you have in the year. You're telling me you're not ready for it. You still need half the tournament to figure out what your 11 is.
Right.
And then I hear one of the, I think it was Niazi speak in one of the post match interviews and say, "जी वसीम भाई मुझसे पूछ रहे थे कि तुम कहाँ बैटिंग करना चाह रहे हो और किस तरह के बैट्समैन हो." That's your head coach. How does he not know? How does he not know before the tournament started who Niazi is and what he does and where he bats and what his strengths are? And I think that that's also a big difference. Like uh, in the likes of Quetta and Karachi, there are personalities that are coming from abroad that are the biggest cricketing personalities in the room. So they
Mm.
kind of you kind of have to cater to them. You have Kieran Pollard. Now, Kieran Pollard, in my opinion, is one of the greatest T20 players of all time. He's playing at the Multan Sultans, but the Multan Sultans have arguably the best T20 manager or coach in the world. So Kieran can't say anything.
Right.
If that coach benches Pollard, he will listen. It's as simple as that, and that's the kind of presence you need. And I tell you what, Flower hasn't gotten there because of his name. He's gone there because of his success and the homework that he does. You speak to anybody who's shared a dressing room with him, he comes into a team and he knows what everybody's role is supposed to be before he even meets them.
I'll give you a great example, and trust me, I mean, I made a ton of mistakes. So the Jamaica Tallawahs team that I inherited had Chris Gale, had Andre Russell,
Yeah,
big names, right?
yeah,
And some of the feedback I had gotten from the owners at that time was there's some issues in the dressing room, things like that. And I was like, well, the one thing that we need to do is we need to surround Chris with guys that are as good as him, or if not better. So we got Kumar Sangakkara, Dale Steyn, who are probably greater players than Chris. And so, like, the level of discourse, Shakib Al Hassan, probably the best player Bangladesh has ever produced. In my opinion, best all rounder in the world, multi format, if you ask me.
yeah.
Having guys like that around just changed the entire dynamic of the team. It's like, wait, Kumar's one of the greatest players of all time. Dale's one of the greatest players of all time. And like, it just elevated the dressing room. And it wasn't just going to be like, oh, because it's Chris, Chris was our leader. And I think Chris did a great job as our leader, right? We don't win, CPL without Chris being our captain, being as great as he was. But having Kumar there, that's another leader on your team. Having Dale there, that's another leader on your team. One of the things that I haven't liked about Quetta this year, and I think this is a Sarfraz thing, is that Sarfraz as a leader has captained a lot throughout his career,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
Nawaz, Iftikhar has captained Peshawar and KPK to success. Um,
I don't
not
see the leadership.
Hafiz, right? Not unlocking those guys in some of the early games where Multan had like really close games. You saw at the end of the game, Sean coming, Karen Pollard, Miller, other guys coming up to Rizwan, making those collective decisions. And I think sometimes that collaboration is not always great, but sometimes it's really important. I think with
Yeah.
Quetta, sometimes when things are getting messy, it's like Sarfraz is out there all alone.
That's a really good point. If you think of the years that Quetta used to be good, even the international players, do you remember the kind of effect KP had on the likes of Emma Shahzad?
Right.
We give Shahzad a lot of stick, not for his talent, but his mental fortitude. KP was able to get to him.
Right.
And Iftikhar is a leader, but I don't see him as a leader at Quetta. Nawaz, I expected to embody a leadership role in the squad, but frankly, when I look at him out in the field, I don't see him pick up that mantle. Or to now that there could be two reasons behind that. One, they're just not doing that enough. They're not capable of it, but frankly, they should be. Or Sarfraz isn't even letting them in,
Yeah, they're not
which
empowered.
would be, yeah, which I actually would think is not the case because I still remember post 2017, I was watching a lot of interviews about these guys, and everybody said that yes, Sefi Bhai is the captain, but he was foiled really well by Shoaib Malik as a locker room leader. Now I know that all of Pakistan has a very strong opinion about Malik, and to a certain extent, you can agree to it. But Malik's done the hard yards in international and domestic cricket. The guy might not be the most talented or the kind of cricketer that applies himself, but he knows ball. Simple as that. So, and whether it's Babar or Sarfraz, they've both said that having him around as a leadership figure in the dressing room has always helped them. So again, whether besides Sarfraz, who else is putting their hand up? I don't think Martin Guptill is doing that. I certainly don't think Nawaz and Iftikhar are doing that. Jason Roy is already out of the team. I certainly don't expect that from Hasnan and Nassim. They're still, frankly, I'd call them kids. I mean, what age is what are you doing in your early 20s? Shaheen Afridi is an exception to many things. The complete fast bowling all rounder at that age, almost unheard of. A captain at that age, almost unheard of. A captain that understands the intricacies of human nature and puts his arm around people when they need it, almost unheard of. You've been around these guys, man. Like some of them, some of the talented guys are super. They're hot headed.
Right.
Forget about the acumen to know when to simmer down and collect a squad together. So please don't use Shaheen as the benchmark. He's an exception to most rules for human beings.
So I spoke to Rizwan when Rizwan was he wasn't even playing for Pakistan, so I know his
Yeah.
agent Talha pretty well,
Yeah.
and I met Rizwan in Dubai during
Hmm.
PSL, and we
Hmm.
were talking about we're just kind of talking, and I was just like this. I was blown away. I was like, this guy's like emotional intelligence levels is super high, and
Yeah.
so when the conversation about who should captain Pakistan came up, I was kind of always like, well, the current leadership regime, I would say it's not my. I would go with someone else, but I
So
think
that includes the captain.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not in. I think Baba has improved significantly as a leader, but I think that from a captaincy perspective, I think you're seeing Rizwan and Shaheen, the influence that they have and how good they are as captains, and I think that they would be much better options. I know this is probably an unpopular opinion,
That's
but
okay. I actually I completely understand where you're coming from, and to a degree, I actually agree with you. Whether we should make that change right now,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
we can.
that's a different debate, right? Because I
Yeah,
think,
yeah,
yeah, I think like some of the things that have happened, over this last series when Sarfraz started playing well, people are like, oh, you should replace, Babra as captain, and Sarfraz did a really good thing, right? Where 15 years ago, 20 years ago, somebody would be like, yeah, I should be the captain. Sarfraz was like, no, Babra's our leader, we're behind him. Well, it's a big change in the culture of Pakistan cricket. And I think
yeah.
So Sarfraz could deserves credit for that. Shadab,
Mhm.
Shaheen, all these guys. But I'm just talking about from like a leadership, tactically, emotional intelligence, etc. I think those guys are probably a little bit ahead of Bobber. But yeah, let's just end with this because we've gone a long time. Going
Mhm.
forward, who's your core? Who's your Quetta core? Who are you going with? Four, five, six guys.
You're
Who
asking me about retentions, essentially.
essentially?
I'm gonna keep if I can. If I get Hasaranga for the full season next year, he's on that list. I mean, I don't see him going anywhere.
Let's talk about the players that 100%. Okay.
Okay, fine. Yeah, that's fair. If we can keep a hold of Nassim, because I know that he wanted to leave this year already. That's what people were telling me. But I would not let go of Nassim and Hasnan if Takhar and Nawaz.
Mm,
Those guys, those are my Pakistani boys. They got to be in this squad. I would even actually maybe see how Hassan Ali's, because he's still in the squad by the way. Hassan Ali's domestic season goes and consider that because a Pakistani batter is a rare commodity. I would not hold on to Umar Akmal and Muhammad Hafiz. I would also I know that Sarfraz has already come down to I think silver or gold, which is one of those categories. I mean, last year was platinum, which was just
yeah.
beyond me. Like, it was just unacceptable. But as silver or gold, I would also maybe see if Sarfraz is heading towards retirement, then I would not stop him. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
If he wants to retire, I would not pick up the phone and say, "Dude, don't do this." It'd be like, "Hey, thanks for a great career." That's what I would do. So I would also he would not be part of my retentions. But I think besides those four, really nobody stands out that I really want to hold on to. Internationally, like you said, we don't have to go there. But if I had the ability, Hasaranga would be that pick. I would actually not retain Guptill or Roy either. Odin Smith has actually been surprisingly good. I actually don't think he's the worst pick, to be fair, because we already have uh, Ahmed, Naseem, and Hasnan. I would also retain Ahmed. So out of the Pakistani guys, I would retain Ahmed, Naseem, Hasnan, and Iftikhar and Nawaz.
That's interesting. Why Omed?
Honestly, man, I know that he's coming of age as a fast bowler, but his fitness is top
Yeah.
class. He's certainly not a liability in the field. We saw that the other night.
Mm.
And we do need a kind of leadership figure in the fast bowling department. He's played a lot of first class cricket. He's played quality PSL cricket. I think he provides the perfect foil to some of the young hot heads like the Seaman Asnan.
Yeah, so I've thought about this a little bit too. I
Yeah.
generally agree with you. So I'm
Mhm.
bringing Sarfraz back, just like I want to fix this thing with Sarfraz. I think that
You want another title with him? That would be my dream come true,
there's
but
a
I just don't see
comeback,
it happening.
there's a comeback story with Sarfraz around the right team, around the right players.
Yeah.
I think that Sarfraz needs another authority, the way that they had Shane Watson, Kevin Peterson around him to help him.
Would you keep him as captain? No, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. Would you keep him as captain?
I would.
Okay.
I would, and I think it's because I think historically, you can go two ways, right? You can be really cutthroat and be like, "Oh, it's done, right? Sarfraz, you're out." You can go that way, or you can go the other way and be like, "Okay, what does he need to be successful?" Right? We just saw Sarfraz do really well in Test cricket. He can still bat. I think his number one position is probably that number 4 spot, surrounded by two guys that are really good power players, and he's just kind of fitting in the middle of that. If needed, he bats. If not needed, he comes all the way down. Right. That's my usage of Sarfraz. That's how I would evaluate him. But you have to surround him with Riley Russo and Azam Khan, who used to be on Quick.
Look, if you were asking me, if you rephrase the question and ask me, what would your Quetta dream be like? I would be like, yeah, another title at Sarfraz because I'm a fan. I really like the guy. He's somebody that I actually look forward to meeting one day. Is just sitting down and going through his cricketing stories as well. But if it's possible, why the hell not? And I think you're right. If we can, the only way it's possible is surrounding him, cushioning him. I would say with some leaders in the squad that can talk some sense into him when need be a little bit more proactive. I actually think that when he was succeeding, you could see that he's very emotionally intelligent as well. I think that because of the losing nature of this team and also his own form declining, that emotional intelligence is also decreasing, which is a scary thing, to be fair. Like the thing that happened with Shinwari a few years ago, the thing that happened with Nassim last year. He's always been animated, and I've actually liked that about him. But that was a boiling point. Didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
So again, if we can provide that cushion for Sarfraz and he can squeeze in at 4 and play those post power play overs to negotiate the spin, you understand there's a lot of things that need to go right for this to happen, though. Like
Right. I also think from a management perspective, I would never, ever, ever advocate for anyone losing their job, specifically in an environment like Pakistan. You got to hold on to that thing for dear life because of everything that's happening in that country. That being said, I think that Quetta would benefit from a new set of eyes. I think sometimes when you're on the inside, you have relationships with people. I think sometimes you can kind of those relationships can force you to make certain decisions that are not in your best interest. I think it would really help Quetta, Karachi, some of these teams to just have a new set of eyes. Even Islamabad, right? So like if you look at Islamabad is probably like the model franchise in Pakistan cricket. Multan is obviously moving in that direction as well.
them too for sure.
I think the one thing that you see with Islamabad, and they kind of make this mistake over and over again, is that they kind of had like the same bowler, like Fahim, Hassan, Tom Curran. They're all like the same bowler, same angle, same height, same pace. And so it's like if you're
The
like
bowling is very weak, very weak.
if you're batting against like a bowling machine, right? It's like, yeah, if you're just facing 130, 135 every single time, you're probably gonna start getting good at it. So they kind of lack that variation.
Yeah.
But you suspect that they are kind of like thinking about that. Like they know that probably. They're probably that. And so I think but generally speaking, kind of having that new set of eyes, I think is really valuable. I think Quetta probably needs that to a certain extent.
I also think that in that retentions list that I said, I would like to see him this season if we're playing dead rubbers as well. Omer Yusuf.
Yeah.
He scores at 140 plus. I know he doesn't have a large sample size of T20s, but in the run rate renaissance, if all these young Pakistani batters are going at it, why not give Omer a shot too, right?
No, the Pakistan's answer to Virat Kohli. He looks like that playing the cover.
Yeah, I know it. Like, I mean, I wish from the cricketing side of things, but give him a shot. And even if he shows a glimpse of it, because I think he's less than 25 years of age, so keep him as well, man. Like Pakistani batters, like I really think that's the commodity to invest in for any PSL franchise.
Oh, big time. I actually think that, and my opinion on this is pretty strong, that we don't understand batting talent in Pakistan. Like we have no idea, right? We'll do these trials. There'll be like a guy will come in and he'll play 4 deliveries, and based on those 4 deliveries, you're making a huge assessment about a guy's like ability as a batsman. batting. Yeah, Fawad Alam is like the best example in my opinion. Where if someone saw Fawad Alam in like a trial, they'd be like, "Nah, get out of here! Don't play cricket ever again." Right? But the guy was like an expert at kind of figuring out a way to use that. His actual like talent was his appetite for runs and his ability to solve a way to get runs with that
And
technique.
just be there forever.
Yeah, be there forever. And like I think he was underutilized as a one-day player as well. And so like, Pakistan our kind of thought on batting has been always kind of informed by like that Shahid Afridi like legacy. And I think it's really hurt us, right? That's one of the reasons why we've pushed guys like Umar a lot longer. Like they have a lot longer rope than somebody else because like they look a little bit better than the other guy. And I think that's just, I think it shows that our batting culture is not what it needs to be.
I'm glad though we're moving away from the obsession to be an orthodox batter though. Like I remember when Heather Ali had that chat with Inzi, and I mean I'm a huge Inzi fan, and then Inzi was like, "No, you got to get your batting technique right." And I'm like, "No, he doesn't. If he's scoring 150 plus and averaging over 25, that's all I need in T20 cricket."
I'm a huge Heather Ali fan. I think Heather is probably, if you think about like the kings of Pakistani batting, if you will, right? Like the Mount Rushmore. Obviously, Babar is there. The Mount Rushmore, not like historically, not like with like Hanif and like Javed Mia, not that like right now. Mount Rushmore Pakistani talent. It has to be Babar, it has to be Abdullah Shafiq, has to be Heather Ali, has to be in there. In my opinion, he's that good. But I think that he's been kind of misguided, poorly developed, really screwed up by the Pakistani team as well. Karachi's probably not the best place for him to go to.
No, it's not.
Kind of get better.
It's not.
But the guy is so good, and I think we've really, it's a long line. Imran Nazir, Yasser Hamid, a long line. We could probably do another podcast about it.
Wasted batting talent. That's a topic for discussion.
That is I think there's like 20 guys. Like there's like 20 guys that
for sure. Although the good thing about Heather is that time is on his side for now.
Yeah, but the one thing I would say criticism towards Heather is that like as a player, you also have to be able to kind of solve it, right? Like what is preventing me from becoming the best version of myself?
Exactly.
And it could be people around him, maybe not giving him the right advice. Sometimes it's situational. Like, do you watch NBA basketball? Are you a basketball fan?
Look, I watch it when I am not at work because I'm based out of the UAE, so my timings don't allow me to focus on it enough. During the pandemic, I was watching it religiously because we just worked where my sleep hours were screwed up. But some of the references you've pointed out, I do know because I read a lot of the Bleacher Report and all of that media coming out of the US. But unfortunately, American sports with my time zone is difficult.
But think about like football is a great example, right? I suspect you watch football similar time zone.
Yeah.
You look at Tottenham, right? They have Richarlison, right? And they acquired him. It was a great signing. But really, was it? Because like Richarlison's son and Kane can't play in the same 11. So
it has to fit for you,
huh?
It has to fit for the team.
Yeah, exactly. So your three best guys can't play in the same 11. So like it actually impacts what you think about Richarlison because you're like, oh, he's not scoring goals, but he's also not playing a lot. And so I think like the roster construction and the talent out there, it's like there's a complexity to it. And I think the moment that we understand that, we won't have these conversations about Quetta falling from grace, if you will.
100%. And on that note about last thing before we go, just on that note about Heather Ali not being self-aware, I do want to compliment Azam Khan. He's incredibly self-aware for a young guy. He is constantly like yesterday. He was not. I mean, look, I always say be happy, not satisfied. I mean, he's always Azam seems like that. He's constantly happy about his life, but he never seems satisfied as a professional, which I think is a great characteristic. He came out yesterday and said, "Look, I had a problem against high pace. My average is 40 now against high pace, and I'm striking well against it. I had a great day, but I can do better." The introspective understanding of his weaknesses,
very mature.
That's going to take him far.
Yeah, very mature, and I think a lot of credit has to go to Moin Khan as well, right?
Sure,
Historically, there have been things that Moin has done as a selector, as a coach, things like that I would say I disagree with. Some things that he said, but like man, like Moin was a really great player. Like Moin was awesome. Moin would be really good at T20 cricket, but the fact that he, a
lot of those guys would be, by the way, if you think about it. That's another show, but they would be.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he spawned, Azam Khan, a guy that no one really knew about. Really, he's like a birth child of like the PSL, like Haris is, and just phenomenal. Moin deserves a lot of credit for what Azam has become.
Yeah, for sure, man.
All right, Musad, thank you very, very much. It was great fun. Probably can go on for hours. Obviously, your passion for the game, your knowledge of the game has been, great to kind of be a part of, and would love to have you back on and have more of these conversations. Thank you, and last words. Last words from you.
No, look, it was a pleasure being on. Great insight, especially the time we spent in some of the locker rooms is super cool. I think the show's just doing really well. I've been listening into some of the conversations you're having with Mohammed Wasim, super insightful. And I feel like GRC as a platform really brings out the best in people too. So just keep doing what you guys are doing, and I'd be happy to be here again.
Yeah, thank you, Musad, and inshallah we'll have you back.
Cheers, guys.